Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This story was created in the Cheating Exposed subreddit by user LacedUp561 in 2023. The post is titled, "My soon-to-be ex-wife cheated on me, ruining our 6+ year relationship. Her life is in shambles now, and I'm happy about it. This is a long story, but I'll try my best to make it short. I will have to make multiple parts though to get the full picture through. My soon-to-be ex-wife, whom we will call Y, and I got married in January 2020. I was 22 years old at the time, and Y was 21. We got married in secret. Only our close friends knew. At this time, we were living on campus at our university in Miami, both coming from 2 counties away where our families lived as well. As soon as we got married, it was a toxic nightmare. For starters, she was secretly texting her ex-boyfriend from high school, whom we will call Jay. She stated that they were just friends now, but this didn't sit right with me as this person was also her first. I'm not the type of person to go into someone's phone as I wanted to trust her. However, she started trying her hardest to hide her phone screen from my point of view, and whenever I touched her phone, she would go crazy. At some point, I was able to figure out her passcode and check her messages. However, I wasn't able to find any proof to follow up on this. Fast forward to March 2020. The pandemic hits and everyone is forced to move back home. We were in a weird position as we still hadn't told our families, so we wore our rings in secret. Everything was seemingly okay until the first week of April 2020, when she just randomly stated she wanted a divorce. It shattered my heart to hear that, as I cried and begged her to stay. I tried asking where I went wrong or if I wasn't doing enough for her. She just stated she didn't love me anymore and that she wasn't the one for me. For about a week, I tried my best to save our marriage. I was at her mercy to try to make things work out, but she's extremely stubborn. At the end of that rough week, I decided to finally accept that she didn't want to be with me anymore. It was hard to accept, but I figured we shouldn't drag this along anymore. I only asked for her to return the wedding rings I gave her. However, she refused to give them back, stating it was a gift from her and she was entitled to keep them. Legally speaking, she may have been right. However, I didn't feel like she deserved to keep them as we were no longer going to be together. The rings were real and I was only on a payment plan for them for about 3 years, with only 4 months in so far. We argued about this over the phone to the point where I hung up and cried to myself in bed. My mother asked what was going on. I confessed everything to her and she held me in her arms and told me everything was going to be okay. The next day, we both went to Y's home, where we confronted her mother and told the truth to her as well. It became an argument between our mothers, with Y still upstairs, refusing to see me but texting me, asking what the hell was going through my mind to get our families involved. It was then agreed by our mothers that the rings would be given back to me, but on another day. About 2 days later, I got a call while at work from Y. She was crying, stating that her mother was kicking her out because she got married in secret. She stated she still loved me and was willing to give us another try, agreeing to cut off Jay, and that we should move in together and live as a married couple. Being the idiot who was in love at the time, I rushed out of work to meet up with her, and then we immediately started looking into apartments in the area. I was able to get us an apartment that was fairly cheap due to the pandemic, and the move-in date was within 3 days. When I got home, I told my parents the news, and my mother was not happy about this. She explained that I was making a mistake and that I needed to rethink all this. My father was disappointed, but stated it was my life, my choice. For the next few days, my friends helped me move things from my place, and I barely talked to my parents during those days. It was heartbreaking for my mother the most, and it hurt me to see my mother upset as well. On the first day in, I felt like our marriage was finally moving in the right direction, and I was finally feeling that happiness I had felt before she told me she wanted to divorce me. However, that happiness did not last long. A few weeks after moving in, we got invited out for some drinks, and when we got back home, I went through her phone to find conversations between her and a different ex, whom we will call E. The messages went as far back as around the time she asked for a divorce, and this made my legs crumble. She was passed out on the bed. However, I woke her up by splashing water on her and started screaming at her. She was confused as she was still tipsy, but I was very furious and yelled at her for over 2 to 3 hours. At one point, I demanded that she leave as she was starting to come back to her senses. She began swinging at me and chasing me around the apartment, actually punching me a few times and clawing at me. I'm not a violent person at all. I took the abuse and just locked myself in the room to keep her away from me. She started crying and begging me to forgive her, to the point where she was on her knees and stated she would do anything to make up for it. We just began arguing and then slowly talking about this situation through the bedroom door. Eventually, we both calmed down and went to bed as it was 4 a.m. when this was happening. I didn't sleep, however, and when 7 a.m. came around, she woke up with only half the memory of what happened overnight. I yelled everything back to her again, but this time she was sober enough to know what was going on and again pleaded for me to stay. She cried, stating she had nowhere else to go. In that moment, I hated her very much, as I felt she stole me from my family, my friends, and my life. About what I saw in the messages, there was nothing that stated that they had done anything physical, at least from what was texted. However, there were conversations that had tension, such as her calling E sexy and E stating they should make a video together, which I still consider cheating. After further arguing, I told her that as long as she promised nothing happened between her and E, I better not see her talking to E ever again, or I would leave her this time. She pleaded that nothing ever happened, but during the same conversation, I asked if anything had happened between her and Jay. She paused and said no. It was at that moment that made me want to investigate this further. My gut told me this was only the beginning of what was to come next and would turn my world upside down. I'll explain more on this another day. Right from the start, I knew that OP's partner was bad news. His mother was right. Anyone who keeps secrets from their partner is not someone you want to be associated with, let alone married to. The very next day, OP gave us an update. Following my previous post, we are now in May 2020 when I asked if anything happened between her and Jay, to which Y reluctantly responded no. The way she answered made me suspicious. To add a little more context, when we first moved in April 2020, I was working at a call center about an hour away from our apartment from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. She was not working due to her job being closed, so I had to start doing Uber Eats, Postmates, and DoorDash, which would usually be from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. after work or whenever on my days off. Also, after the first night we moved in, I received the cold shoulder from her every night. While I was at work, she would text me cute things, such as repeatedly saying she loved me and waiting for me to come home to cuddle. However, once I got home, she would barely touch me or look at me, which led to my discovery about her and E. Anyways, now we're in June 2020, weeks after the incident. At this point, I'm keeping my distance from her, maintaining my same work routine while also trying to finish college classes online. She was not working yet, but whenever I came home, it was never cleaned unless I did it. Around this time, she also adopted a mini golden doodle, but when we moved in, I brought my Malshi along with us, who she loved dearly until our doodle came around, also giving him the cold shoulder. For the next few months, it's been nothing but the same routine. We tried to talk and go out on dates, but it always ended in silence. I tried to break the ice and see if we could work it out, but she never wanted to express herself. Little by little, I felt my love for her fading away as I became numb to her treatment toward me. That was until October 2020 when she finally opened up to me. She apologized for her treatment toward me over the past few months. We felt like we were both ready to leave the past behind and just focus on us now. It was us against the world. This felt even more powerful when I caught COVID the following month, where she cared for me the way a wife should. She ended up catching it from me once I recovered, and I returned the favor. After that, we started acting more like husband and wife. She finally began getting into my hobbies, such as video games, anime, art, and photography, even coming along with me during my late night deliveries where we would vibe out to music and she would help as well. We discovered new things about each other, went on dates, and honestly, it felt heartwarming being in her presence again. That spark between us was finally coming back, but I still held a secret grudge against her actions as it was hard to move on from them. Everything was going well until a few days before Valentine's Day 2021 when I made another discovery. These past months, I still secretly went through her phone every now and then, but honestly, never found anything between her and E besides what I already knew. However, I decided this time to take it a step further and look at messages between her and her best friend, to whom Y would constantly send all the gossip with long messages and screenshots. Going through the messages made my heart sink even more when I found more details about her and Jay. It turns out that Y and Jay slept together a few days before she asked me for a divorce, and this was actually the true reason for her asking me for the divorce. As I kept reading, I discovered that Y and Jay had a conversation sometime in October 2020, I guess for some closure between them, which is why she finally decided to give us a shot. Oddly enough, I was not surprised this time. I woke her up from her nap and just straight up confronted confronted her about what I had just read in a surprisingly calm tone. She started crying and apologizing, and then I just stepped out and went for a drive to clear my mind. Many dark thoughts were going through my head, and I felt like I had no one to turn to. For the next few days, I avoided her as much as possible. We still slept in the same bed, but there was no physical touch between us. On Valentine's Day morning, I received a couple of nudges from her in a cutesy tone, asking what I had planned for her that day. Keep in mind that I was extremely exhausted from work and my deliveries for the whole week, and obviously I was still heartbroken. She started crying, saying that I hadn't planned anything for her. Once I heard that, I jumped out of bed and began scolding her about how crazy she was to think I would do anything for her after what I had just discovered. I yelled at her about how she did not deserve anything from me and how our marriage was a total disaster. Now, you may be wondering why I was still with her. At this point in my life, I honestly did not have the energy for anything. I was completely blank, a complete 180 from the person I used to be. I used to be creative, making drawings and paintings, doing photography and videography, and always looking forward to the next adventure. But I felt hollow, wondering what the point of life was. I know I'm stupid for this, but I felt like it was just easier to hide it from the world. We were already so deep into married life that it felt like there was no going back. If I did, then what would I do? It was a dead end for me, and I blame myself for relying on her to make me happy, despite her also making me the saddest. It doesn't mean I forgave her or anything, I just became more numb. So after this discovery, we again entered another period of keeping our distance. Around April 2021, she took a trip to Peru with her grandmother, and honestly, I was a little excited to have the place to myself for a change. I told my friends the news, and they began showing up at my place frequently while she was away, not knowing what I knew. They made me feel like my old self again, doing our old late-night shenanigans and activities like game nights, watching movies, or just hanging out. I loved the happiness I was getting back, even if it was just for a moment. At the same time, the lease on our apartment was up by the end of May 2021, and I had been speaking to my father about my options. That same month, my mother went to Chicago to spend time with family members for the remainder of the year, and my dad came up with the idea of letting me and Y stay at their home while he followed her to Chicago. I agreed, but Y wasn't so enthusiastic about it. However, I didn't need her approval. It was either this or paying rent twice the price for another year. I moved back in with my parents in June 2021. Y was still in Peru, but was returning in the next few weeks. I finally felt at home again, moving back into my old room and seeing the layout that represented my spirited youth. I enjoyed my last few weeks of freedom, but I knew this happiness wasn't going to last forever as Y finally returned from her trip to Peru. The next part of this story is where things really hit the fan, almost costing me my life. The following is now the third update in this story, so now it's June/July 2021, and Y and I are living at my parents' home. I started a new job in sales and was able to advance pretty quickly to a supervisor role within 2-3 months, which paid well enough to afford my dream car. As for my marriage, we had a steady relationship for the remainder of the year. We had our good and bad moments, but overall it was still a blank feeling I had. I didn't know what I felt toward Y, whether it was anger, sadness, or depression. I just felt like the marriage was existing for no reason. By the start of 2022, there was a bit of reconciliation between us, enough for us to start going out on dates again. We opened up more, but we were still wondering where our marriage stood. Everything seemed okay until May 2022 when my life flashed before my eyes. I invited my friends over for a hangout at my parents' place to watch a boxing match. I told Y about it and stated that it would only be for a few hours and to expect some yelling as we got passionate about sports, and she was okay with it. As the fight went on, we kept getting louder and louder, to the point where she was angrily texting me to keep the noise down. She would come out to grab snacks or use the bathroom only to keep slamming the door back to the room. After the fight, one of my friend's trucks had a dead battery, so I used my car to jump it. While we were jumping it, the four of us kept conversing for about another half hour. During our conversation, Y demanded that I come inside repeatedly through text, to which I replied that we were finishing up. Just as I was about to head inside, Y stormed out of the house and headed to her car. I asked if everything was okay, but she had a very serious look on her face and angrily pushed me aside. Before leaving for Chicago, my dad installed outdoor solar lights in the front yard. The way Y's car was positioned, her only way out was through a grassy area that had one of these lights. She revved up her car, and before she took off, I tried to stop her from running over the light and asked what was wrong. She paused for about 5 seconds, then stepped hard on the gas and almost ran me over. I jumped out of the way as fast as I could, getting grazed on my knee. She drove off quickly, dragging the light beneath her car and scraping the road. I sat on the ground with a surprised look on my face, thinking about how she had just almost run me over. My friends helped me up and asked if I was okay. I just looked at them in shock and they offered their help. I told them to go home while I went back inside, shaken up from the moment. I kept calling Y's phone to see why she did what she did. I went inside our room to find her phone unlocked on the ground. I went through the phone for the first time in months, and it turned out there were still secrets to find out about Y. It turns out Y and J actually had a continuous affair for months, ranging from March 2020 to October 2020. I finally felt something in my heart and brain telling me to do what needed to be done a long time ago. It was about 2 a.m. and I was still freaking out about this incident. I repeatedly called my sister, who lives down the road from me, about what had just happened, but there was no response. Y returned and tried to enter the home, but I managed to lock the door with an additional lock. I snuck out to the back and drove over to my sister's house while hyperventilating as Y pursued me. I got to my sister's house and knocked, but as Y pulled up in the driveway, I began knocking frantically as my sister and her husband finally opened the door. This caused Y to back off and drive away. I explained the situation to my sister and cried to her about what had just happened. I finally opened up about how Y had cheated on me in the past. It was a hard pill to swallow, but I was ready to finally let this marriage go. I asked her to accompany me back home to make sure Y didn't try to hurt me again. When we got there, Y was already packing up her belongings. I kept my distance for about 5 minutes, then asked her to give me back the rings and the keys. She already expected this as she had them in her pocket and she handed them to me. She grabbed her suitcase and took our golden doodle with her. My sister and I talked a bit longer and then she finally went home. That night was a long one for me. I slept at about 6 a.m. only to be woken up at about 7 a.m. by knocking on my window from Y. She spent the remainder of the night in her car and asked if I could at least take the golden doodle inside. As much as I wanted to, I ignored her knocking. This went on for about 30 minutes. Later on, I reached out and met up with her to talk about the situation. I finally told her everything I knew and decided it would be better for us to separate. She cried and begged me to let us work this out, but I was tired of the emotional and physical abuse over the years, the lies, the heartbreaks, everything. As toxic as it sounds, what followed for Y was actually satisfying, as I felt like it was karma for everything she had put me through. I know I will sound like a jerk in the next part, but I believe I deserve a genuine laugh for once. User DecentBeat5522 said, "You bought a car rather than getting your own place. The point is, she never respected you. She didn't see you as her rock and treated you as such. She sounds crazy, but you also have some flaws that need to be addressed. The best we can do is to live and learn every day. Learn from the mistakes we all make." Under this comment, OP said the following: "My parents actually talked me into staying with them since rent is high down here, $2,000 plus for a small apartment. They supported me getting my car since I started saving money for it when I was 17. User IlNewt4010 said, "Feel bad for you, bruh, but how blind could you be to stick up with that for years?" In part 4, OP said the following: Y moved back in with her mother, but not for long, as she does not get along with her stepfather and has too much pride to live under her mother's roof again. She ended up finding her own place in August 2022, stating that if I ever wanted to make it work out, I was always welcome to move back in with her. My parents came back from Chicago about a week after we separated. The majority of the furniture in our bedroom was hers, as she made me throw out my items, such as my bed and drawers, and replace them with hers because it looked more classy. Besides the bedroom, we had a couch, tables, kitchen appliances, etc., all boxed away in another room in the house. The day she told me she was coming to take her belongings, my father and I left everything out in the driveway, but did not bother to help them move anything into the truck. She brought along her mother, stepfather, her uncle, and her 2 aunts, who I would say are not all physically strong people. Her grandma was also there to mostly watch, but helped with little things to move. What took my father and me about 30 minutes to maneuver out of the house took them 3 hours to load into a truck. We peeked through the window, having a few drinks, and laughed about how they were struggling while they were all talking badly about me and my family. I don't know why they included my family, but then again, they're a family that talks badly about everyone and everything. When Y moved into her apartment, she was working a new job she got through her field of study, which paid well by the hour but didn't provide enough hours. She had too much pride to work a second job as she felt that this was beneath her. Because of this, she struggled to keep up with her rent, electricity, water bills, car payments, insurance, etc. She reached out to me a couple of times asking for money, but I refused to help her as I felt like her financial problems had nothing to do with me. Y would try to gaslight me into giving her money, saying I shouldn't let our golden doodle suffer along with her, to which I replied that she should go ask her lover for money. I was surprised to learn later on that she told her mother the truth, and her mother took my side and stated she would not be giving her money either. The rest of her family still hated me for not wanting to work it out after she cheated, but their opinions didn't matter because none of them are married themselves. Months went by, we were still legally married. Y agreed to go half on the divorce fees but did not have the money. During these discussions, she admitted she still had hope for us to work it out, as she still had love for me and believed I still loved her back. Call me stupid, but I did love her back. I just knew I couldn't keep playing this game anymore. Despite everything she's done to me, it was still hard for me to hate her, as this is someone I grew close to in high school who helped me when I was at my lowest point in life and made me happier than anyone else ever could. Yet she still managed to break me and made me feel like I would never be good enough for anyone ever again. We still had each other on social media, and even though she claims to be struggling with money, she always seems to be out every weekend at the clubs. This usually ends up with her drunk texting or calling me, stating she was wrong for how she treated me. Whenever I post on my Instagram or Snapchat stories about being out late at night, she's usually the first to see my posts, often within a minute. She acknowledges that I look happier without her. As of now, I wouldn't say I'm happy, but I do feel like this is freedom. Since moving out, she's gotten into 2 car accidents just a few months apart. We're no longer on the same insurance together, but she still called me asking if I could financially help her, which I refused, telling her she was on her own now. I still had her on my phone plan a few months later, but I decided to disconnect her line without letting her know. Once reconnected, she angrily texted me days later about how she lost her number and had to get a new phone because her current phone was still locked with my carrier and she couldn't call to unlock it since I was the account holder. She called me a jerk and I couldn't help but laugh about it. I have this ex-girlfriend that I ended on good terms with. We were friends until Y and I got married, during which she forced me to cut off my friendship with her out of fear that my ex would try to get with me again. We started hanging out again, and when Y found out, she swore that I only divorced her to get back with my ex. I had no interest in her after the breakup, only seeing her as a friend at this point even after Y and I separated. From what I heard from a mutual friend, she tried to get back with E, who now has a girlfriend and a child. She also tried again with J, who now has a girlfriend. Y would sometimes reach out to me about how she's still behind on certain bills, would barely eat, almost got evicted twice, and can't afford to care for the golden doodle. If I had to guess, she's most likely getting money from her grandmother. We would still text from time to figure out a court date or days when I still had to give her some leftover stuff from home. She would always say she would never find a guy like me and how much she wishes we could try again and regrets her actions. Part of this made me feel happy for karma. The other part made me feel sad about how everything led up to this moment. Around March 2023, we went to court to finally file for our divorce. While waiting for our turn, she stepped out into the hall to cry her eyes out, while I just sat there not knowing what to think. After about 10 minutes, it was finally our turn and we began signing away. Ever since then, we now just talk with a few texts once every 2 weeks, saying what we have left to say. As for myself, I was promoted to manager a month after we separated. I stayed in this position until November 2022 as I was overworked to the point of getting no sleep. I was able to find a better paying job, one that I continue to work for to this day. During the marriage, I gained weight from overeating to help cope with my depression. I've been going back to the gym but need to work on getting a routine. I have big plans with my friends for the summer and for myself later this year. It's now June 2023. I wouldn't say life is perfect, but whenever I'm having a bad day, I think about how Y's life is basically falling apart now ever since we parted ways. It makes me feel like she deserves to feel what I felt for over 6 years. I'm an asshole for thinking this way about her, but at least my life is finally going in the right direction and hopefully it continues that way and she can see how happy I can be without her. User Diligent Persimmon 3 said, sometimes it takes time to grow a pair and stand up to confront the situation head on, which is what you did after you struggled for a while. You seem to be the stable one while she was going through changes with J and E. From what you said, she tried reaching out to both J and E, but they were already gainfully involved in other more stable relationships. So she reaches out to you from time to time. It's nice to see you make the right decision. Keep moving forward, bro. I hope you find the right person to make you happy and keep hitting the gym to stay in shape. Under this comment, OP said the following: it seems like she's just happy to have anyone. While I would be happy to have someone who is faithful, life goes on, just got to keep on living and hope for the best. User White Ninja said, you're not the asshole for feeling that way. It's perfectly normal. Just remember to never go back. No matter how convincing she seems or how much time has passed, she lost you and you should always stick to your guns. To her, you'll be the one that she lets slip away due to her dumb actions, and she'll be the one who made you the best version of yourself through all the pain despite and because of her own actions. It's great that you get to her fall apart while your life gets better. Just remember everything has a time and she may meet someone else. Things may get better for her, and regardless of how things seem in her life, never tie your life to hers again in any way, physical or even emotionally, in how her life seems to be going. A lot of people do this without even realizing it. It's really awesome to read your story because there are a few of these that I feel really show the happy ever after ending, but it seems like you're getting there. If not already there, I'm happy for you, really. All the best on this road ahead and all that life has to offer. Under this comment, OP said the following: I wouldn't say I had a happy ending, but it's a fresh start. I can now focus on doing what makes me happy. Thank you for reading along. I'm going to keep on pushing and become the person I should have been years ago. I don't want to victim blame too much because I understand that love can make you do stupid things or ignore issues that you would otherwise be irritated by. I feel like OP went through exactly that. He was blinded by love or just ignorant. Or maybe he just couldn't come to terms that life was not going to go as he planned. And unfortunately, his ex is one of those toxic people that somehow wiggle back into your life even after you leave them. The following is the final part of the saga, as OP titled it the epilogue. This is my last post about this, just to clarify a few things. I had to cut this section out of part 4 to be able to post it. If there are any other questions, I can try to answer them as well. The history of Y and me dates back to our high school days. There are more details about how Y and I first met up to the point where we got married. Looking back on it, we always had a toxic relationship, but that's not to say it was all bad, as we had our great moments as well. As for how our boyfriend-girlfriend relationship went and why I married her, I'll explain that another time, if necessary. I appreciate the feedback, both good and bad. Like I said before, I was a dumbass who thought everything would magically work out. I don't know if I would call this outcome a win for me, but at least I can finally start over now. To the readers who think this is made up, I don't have the time or capability to come up with a story like this. I'm posting my experience as a way to get this off my chest. I'm not the best when it comes to expressing myself in person, and Reddit probably isn't the best place to do it, but posting here with other people who have had similar experiences made it easier for me. But thanks for still actually reading all these long posts. Sadly, this isn't my first rodeo. There's a relationship I had before this that broke me and made me who I am today. It sounds dramatic, but that's the best way to put it. I'm open to talking about it one day. Just like I said earlier, that was the final update in the main story, but there are actually about another 5 or 6 additional posts in this story. If you find this story interesting, let me know in the comments that you want part 2, and I'll get to work on getting that out to you all.